Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
This is the Slow Poisoner. I come to you from the future with these words of warning.
It's a hot horror planet. 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 Living in science fiction. Past the point of no returning. We got high on gasoline. And we blew the scene.
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 82. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Lee's Comics. Attention comic book fans, Lee's Comics in Mountain View, California has closed. But here's the good news. Lee's Comics eBay store is still going strong with over 10,000 vintage comics, the majority of which are now on sale, for half off. Choose from Lee's huge stock of golden, silver, bronze, and modern age comics, and specializing in Silver Age Marvel titles. You can count on friendly service, accurate grading, and quick, secure shipping backed by a money-back guarantee. To check out Lee's eBay store, go to eBay. Click Advanced Search to the left of the search bar, scroll down to Sellers, and enter Lee's Comics Inc., period. That's LeesComics, period. Don't forget the period. Lee's Comics is shipping daily with no delays. New items daily. Mention the Fun Ideas Podcast and get a free bonus gift.
Long title, Looking for the Good Times, Examining the Monkey Song One by One, by Michael A. Ventrella and Mark Arnold. A book that examines each song, gives lots of details about each song, and our own personal opinions. You can find this book on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and anywhere where good books are being sold. Our webpage is wordpress.monkeys.com, where you can see many of the songs and give your own opinions of them. And we will be discussing this more on Zilch.
Hey Michael, it says here we've written another book about the monkeys. Wasn't the first one enough?
Not at all, Mark. Our original book, Looking for the Good Times, Examining the Monkey Songs One by One, was very successful, but only covered half the story.
Which half?
The group half. Our new book, Headquartered, A Timeline of the Monkeys' Solo Years, covers the solo half.
Who knew the monkeys record so many solo albums?
Not only that, but this book covers all of their solo projects, including stage shows, horse racing, running record labels, directing and starring in TV shows and movies, voice acting, and jail.
Jail? Did the monkeys go to jail?
You have to read the book to find out.
You've sold me. Have you sold them?
Who's them?
Those people out there listening to this.
Well, listen to this. This book has discographies, photos, and other information about the Prefab Four, Mickey, Davey, Peter, and Mike, the Solo Monkeys, plus another nifty cover by Scott Shaw.
Wow, he did our last cover. And this one's equally good. Where can you get this masterpiece?
Announcer.
Announcer? That's me. Get Headquartered, a timeline of the monkey solo years, written by Michael A. Ventrella and Mark Arnold. Those two guys. It's available in hardback, paperback, or ebook from BearManorMedia.com or from Amazon. Get your copies today.
Cool. I'm going to get one today. Well, my summer break has been shorter than I planned, and now I have 2 episodes ready. The first one was last time, as it was an urgent matter involving a Kickstarter for Guy Gilchrist's Monster Dance Book that will be expiring on August 19th, 2020. The second new episode is today's episode. There's no new news on my books at this time, but the others are still available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and most through BearManorMedia.com. Our guest today is an artist and writer whose work has appeared in Nickelodeon magazine, as well as his own Magic Whistle. He's here today to discuss his new project involving Mad Magazine movie parodies. Here he is, Sam Henderson. Okay, on the phone today we have Sam Henderson. How are you?
Okay.
And we're going to talk a little bit about your career, and you're doing something interesting with Mad Magazine movie and TV parodies right now. But first, if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in cartooning and other things that you do.
Well, I've been doing a comic called Magic Whistle for about 20-some years, and I do cartoons on and off. And right now I'm working on a memoir called Hail Seizure, just about my life as an epileptic. And right now I've had a couple installments in American Bystander, and I'm not sure what I'm doing now. Magic Whistle's on hiatus right now, so I've just been doing cartoons here and there for not much money, and hoping I'll have a renaissance with Hail Seizure when I'm finished with that.
And tell me a little bit about Magic Whistle. I mean, how did that get started? I've seen it in both comic book form and just appearing in different publications. Well,
I was doing it as a mini comic for several years in the 90s, and passing that around, and eventually that publisher decided he wanted to pick that up, and that was in the 90s when more people were doing zines, so it was easier to do it that way. I don't know what I do now. Now the computers are the main venue for showing your work around, but back when Xeroxes were the main venue, it was easier to get things done. Maybe if I were in my 20s now, computers would be the way I would get in, but that way it was through that time it was through Xeroxing.
So have you kept it in a digital form at this point? You said you're in hiatus, but I mean, do you keep doing them and just having them there and then hope for a print publication at some point, or are you just not doing them at all?
Well, I'm still doing cartoons, but I'm not sure about Magic Whistle, what form I'm going to do it in. I still go to conventions, and it doesn't seem I'm known as I was 25 years ago. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older and they're getting younger, but it was just easier when I was the same age as everybody else. Maybe it's just because people are still in their 20s now, and I don't fit in as much. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just harder when I'm. Mini comics used to be just the way to get in, and now it just seems to be the finished product now.
Yeah, I don't know what kids read today, to be honest. If they're reading anything digitally, or if they're just not reading at all, which sometimes I think that they don't read at all.
Yeah.
And just play video games all day or something, or watch movies or YouTube or Snapchat or whatever the latest website du jour is, as it were, or app du jour. But yeah, you probably got more coverage back in the days. Didn't you used to appear pretty regularly in things like Nickelodeon magazine and things like that?
Yeah, and that's another thing. They concentrated more on licensed characters, and that was kind of disappearing as a magazine. At its peak, it had a circulation in the hundreds of thousands, and that was slowly declining until they eventually decided it wasn't really worth it. And things like SpongeBob were more of made more money for them, and it just wasn't worth it to do a magazine with original features.
Right, which is kind of a shame. Yeah. Because when I ever look, still at this age, I'm 53 now. I go to the store. Well, at least when they're open and have magazines there. I go to the store and say, "What do kids read now?" And they'll be like a Spider-Man magazine. It'll be something that's licensed and tied into something. It'll be a Frozen magazine or something like that. And I go, "How disappointing! Why isn't there any just general kids magazines anymore?" When I was a kid, there was, but
yeah, I know. Well, it used to be I mean, comics used the idea of a store that only sells comics would have been foreign like 30 or more years ago. But now it's pretty much the only way to get comics now.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of a shame, yeah, because, I agree. You know, I used to see him at the drugstore, at the liquor store, at the candy store, at the grocery store. But
and they used to sell some of them would sell in the millions, and now you're lucky to break about 10,000 or so.
Right. So, any other projects coming along the way besides what you talked about, or?
No, I'm just doing stuff as a hobby right now. Just because I've been collecting so much stuff for years, I'm just putting it up on a blog just to share with other people, and also to prove I have it.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing another project, and we talked about this a little bit earlier when you'd first started out, and then, now we're talking about it because you said, I've done enough. So it's about the Mad Magazine movie and TV parodies, which unfortunately they no longer do, considering their current reprint situation. But what is it exactly that you're doing?
Well, I haven't. Maybe I'll get to the TV shows when I'm finished with movies. But I'm trying to just do every Mad movie parody up to a certain point. Just from A to Z, just uploading them on the web right now. I've devoted a blog to it, just excerpts from movie parodies, enough to not skirt copyright. Just showing, I started with the Addams Family, and I'm ending with Zorro the Gay Blade. Most are drawn by Mort Drucker, of course, and I'm just showing a few panels and comparing it to the actual movie itself, and showing pretty much the trailer for every one of them is on YouTube, and I've been putting that up and showing a few panels from the parody itself.
Are you actually? I haven't. I should take a look at it, but are you actually trying to find, like, I know Drucker used stock photos and things like that for reference sometimes. So are you trying to find the actual photo that he may have used to do his caricatures?
No, but I am. But sometimes I am comparing them to. Sometimes imitators like Cracked and Crazy did parodies as well. So if I can find those, I'll show a couple panels from that as well. And a lot of their artists copied directly from the Drucker parodies. So I'll try to show examples of that as well.
And why did you decide to do it A through Z? Was it just convenience? Or
it was easier than chronological order.
Okay.
Just because if I just did order, like, people just wouldn't bother with certain eras, and they just, if they did that, then they just forget about it. So I just wanted to just show various parts of history at once, and it's interesting looking through it all. How much movie-going has changed as well in real life. Because, Mad originally started, basically as a portal to the adult world, and then they started just parodying things that kids that read Mad would watch. Because they started out parodying things like Lawrence of Arabia, just as big epic movies, and then they started parodying things like Star Wars, things that kids that read Mad would watch. And then they would just parody things based on taking notes, watching movies when we would. And so their parodies would come out 6 months after the movies came out. Then during the VCR era, videotapes of the movies came out 6 months after the release, so they would base the movie parodies on watching the VHS tapes of the movies, and they'd be able to fast forward and if they missed something and base things on that, and then eventually they'd actually get screeners from the movie companies themselves, because it was kind of a badge of honor to be parodied by Mad.
Right. But wasn't it in the early days, I've read it, and of course I'm working on a Mad book myself, that the movie studios did not like the parodies at first and wouldn't freely give out photographs. And
that's the way it was. Yeah, probably was that way at first. That's what I was saying. It was considered slanderous for them to do that at first. Then it was considered flattery, and also when Mad was bought by Warner Brothers, it was considered kind of a tie-in. Like I covered Batman because I'm at the Bees right now, and that was they scheduled a release of the issue of Mad where they parodied Batman to be at the same time as they scheduled the issue of Mad to come out at the same time as the release of the movie.
Right. And
so there are scenes in the parody that aren't in the movie because they watched it. It seems they watched it. I'm just I didn't get information from them. I'm just getting this from the parody. There are scenes in the parody that aren't in the movies. So I'm guessing they watched the screener without seeing the final edit, just so they could get it out in time.
Do you find a lot of examples of that, or is it like the more current movies just because of the speed of trying to get the parody out?
Well, it's more now. I have a cutoff point, but the more recent ones, there's more of a, and also because they're shorter when they came out. Mm-hmm. It became more about the movie parodies in the late 80s and early 90s, and so they tried to get more in, and so they were shorter. It used to be they were about 8 or 9 pages in the earlier days, and then they eventually devolved into like 4 or 5 pages when they tried to get more in.
Why do you think that happened? Do you think it just was they couldn't justify a 9-page parody, or too many other artists and writers wanting to grab space in the magazine, or what?
Well, as I said, they used to just parody. They did one parody in an issue, and then they since they had to do 2 or 3 in an issue, they shortened it to 4 or 5 pages so they could get more in.
And we were talking about there, you said Lawrence of Arabia. When I started reading Mad, which was 1974, the one thing I noticed was that they do parodies of R-rated movies, and movies that I'd never even consider, when I was a little kid, like Serpico. I've seen them since, or Death Wish, or
right.
Where do you think that changed, or why? Is it because of the Warner Brothers thing, or Feldstein no longer being the editor, or just the dumbing down of America or something? What's your take on it?
Movies did kind of dumb down after Star Wars, just because movies were more marginalized, aiming more for a youth audience. And they parodied more R-rated movies just because when they started, movies didn't have ratings.
True.
And so they just went to movies were aimed more for adults overall. So they went to something like Serpico or Death Wish because that was the newest movie, and the ratings weren't. They didn't think about ratings at all at that time. That was a relatively new thing. Ratings were about 5 to 10 years old at that time.
True, but I noticed on Mad that they tended to go to movies that adults would like. Like, they didn't typically do parodies, say, of Disney pictures, although they did a 20,000 Leagues one, I think, or maybe that might have been in Panic, but, that's the only one I can think of that they, like Mary Poppins, you would think they might have done that because that was a big hit movie, but, again, it was a Disney movie.
Well, like I said, the whole magazine overall, was basically just they would make fun of adult things so kids would understand them. Like the whole thing about the magazine was just about how was basically explaining adult things to kids, like about how packaging works, or how things on TV lie to you. And so when they would parody movies that were aimed for adults, they basically explained them to kids.
Do you think that that might be a reason why Mad might have lost its audience along the way, because over time they stopped being so arguably adult and just geared specifically towards kids?
In a way, well, like we were talking about before, just people just stopped reading magazines overall.
Yeah.
So things like that were in the millions and now are in the tens or hundreds of thousands. I think that's one reason, and also because Star Wars changed moviegoing so much. It used to, like now pretty much all movies are pretty much the drive-in Saturday matinee movie is pretty much the standard now, instead of like just a one-time thing. Because it used to be things like The Godfather were pretty much the standard for movies before Star Wars, and then once Star Wars came out, the genre movie became the big budget release.
You mentioned you had a cutoff date of, but you didn't say which date it is, and why. Why is there a cutoff? Why don't you go clear to the bitter end, as it were?
Well, I stopped reading it basically when I graduated high school. So if I were to really have a cutoff point, it would be like around maybe number 250 or something. Mm-hmm. But I decided to continue a little bit after that, just because I know so many people that read my stuff are younger than me, and so I cut off around 350 just because that's such a round number. So I decided around there, like around 96 or so, even though I was in my 20s and stopped reading Mad by that point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and after that, like things like more Drunk was basically just copying from photos and didn't have like there weren't any sight gags on the side, mm-hmm. and I wasn't really familiar with any of the writers and artists they had after then, and I just couldn't relate to any of the stuff and didn't know who any of the people were behind them. So, and some of them are still alive, so I decided not to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
and also, I also didn't want to have references to things that are still around now.
Right.
Even though there are a few, like, because in some of the parodies, even back in the 90s, there are references to things like Biden and Clarence Thomas. But overall, there's some. It's mostly archaic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's probably best to have a cutoff time. I was just curious what your reasoning was, because I still read Mad to this day, but one of my complaints about Mad is the continual, basically dumbing down of it to make it sort of more towards kids than adults. So adults have no interest in reading it because they'll either parody something that kids know better, like, say, the Harry Potter films or something like that, or a ton of superhero movies, and I think, well, there are more adult movies that they have put out. I mean, this one went to more for streaming than in the theaters, but it was in the theaters. An example would be like Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, you know, and that got some good reviews. I watched it. I thought it was pretty good. In Mad's heyday, they would have parodied that right away, but now it seems like they would completely ignore it. This is even before they decided not to do any more parodies, but
they don't.
Yeah, I did a podcast interview with Tom Richmond, and he's still doing some new material for the book, but they basically ended doing new movie parodies, so you know, or TV parodies, you know. So his work now is, you know, just in other articles, and it isn't necessarily caricature work because, you know, the other articles don't really call for stuff like that all the time, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it is kind of an interesting point of fact. I mean, you already touched on it, saying, you know, things have changed and people don't really read magazines. But is there, in your opinion, a need for parodies of movies anymore, even if they aren't done in print form? You know, like say if they do it on Saturday Night Live or some other TV show or just streaming on the internet or something.
Well, there's so many things now. Mad's a little bit more obsolete because you have things like Saturday Night Live and The Onion and The Daily Show and things like that. That isn't as necessary. It used to be the only game in town, and now there are so many other things that are around that if Mad were to go away, which I hope it doesn't, it wouldn't. It's not the institution it once was,
right?
Because there are so many other things. And Saturday Night Live sometimes does do movie parodies, but it's more of like a what-if situation, like comparing like a current sitcom, like if Trump were in it or something.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, they don't usually just do a straight parody. You're correct. Yeah. But do you think people in this day and age just don't get parody anymore, or there's no need for satire, or were you just inundated with too many sources of it?
There's too many sources of it. It used to be just basically like every commercial is pretty much like just like every not every source, like every book or everything that exists is kind of self-referential in some kind of way. Because it used to be only Mad that made fun of something, but now everything pretty much has a wink to it. Like every commercial is kind of self-referential in some kind of way, even if it's serious, it makes a reference to something.
Yeah. Do you think that political correctness might have anything to do with the changeover at all?
I don't know about that. But like an advertisement, like Mad used to make fun of how an ad would look, but now that many ads are parodies or references to other ads, it doesn't really matter. Just doing a straight parody of an ad in a magazine isn't enough now.
Yeah. The only reason I'm asking is because in more recent issues of Mad, which I find upsetting, but I guess I understand why they do it, is they've edited some of the recent issues of reprints of older articles and movie parodies to take out certain offensive things or kind of update the references. And
I've noticed that. Well, as I've gone back to issues, I'm surprised by some of the references. Like, for example, like they did a Bad News Bears parody, and they actually used the N-word in it. Yeah. And so I had a disclaimer on my post saying that was the case. But I also said it was 1976 when things like that were common. and they didn't think of anything of it back then, 44 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Well, one thing that was shocking, and I guess I read it originally. See, sometimes when I was a kid, it just kind of like, okay, it never bothered me. But now I'm going, wow, that actually made it in there. Is the original Star Wars parody that they did back in early '78 or late '77 or something, by Harry North, or he was the artist on it. It actually had the word fag in it. I was like, I think the reference was to C-3PO. It's like, and R2-D2 was saying something like, I'm hanging out with a fag robot here, and I was like...
I've noticed that, there's a few things like that, and I've just put in display, showing on my other blog that I've had, where I post things with old comics, I've noticed things like slurs and stereotypes, and rather than edit them out, I've just said these were things in the past, and you don't know what you'd think. Even though we're all enlightened now, if you, as a woke person, were to have gone back 50 years, you can't say you would have been woke back then. Yeah,
because like I said, when I read that Star Wars parody when it first came out, I was probably 10 years old, and, I knew that word, but I didn't go around saying it to everybody.
Right.
And I probably laughed at that gag, and, just later, I go, wow, I didn't realize that was in there. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't do that now, but they probably wouldn't clutch their pearls or anything when they did do it back then.
Yeah.
And, if you were to read that in 77, you wouldn't be so shocked seeing that like you would now.
Now, I've read every issue, Mad, but I can't say that I've read all of them very recently, so you're going through them now. Are there any other kind of extreme situations or shocking situations that you've seen over the course of doing this?
Well, I noticed even in the Batman parody, they use the word fag as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because I never, it's kind of funny. I never really thought of, Mad doing, any sort of foul language whatsoever. And, even though I was reading it, like even, like they did a parody of Apocalypse Now, and I think they bleeped out what would have been shit, it's like, and it's like, that's what I'm used to, but, in the last few issues of Mad before they went all reprint, they started lowering the bar a little bit, and they let a few shits in there into the actual text. I was like, whoa, Mad's kind of growing up a little bit, I guess, if that's considered growing.
That's because it's more acceptable just in media overall, just the loosening of standards. Just because, like, now, especially now, like with the whole candid tape of Trump saying grab them by the pussy, like now you can say pussy on TV.
Right.
just even if it weren't for him, like just swearing on TV isn't a big deal now. So, and it really isn't aimed towards any group, so it's not really as offensive as any kind of slur against somebody, like calling somebody a fag.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've noticed in some of the older parodies, like just the idea of being gay is a punchline.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the mannerisms are just funny in and of themselves.
Right. And going back to just words in general, I remember, you probably have seen it, I'm sure, the National Lampoon parody of Mad that they did back in 1971.
Yeah.
And they did a page, you're too old for Mad when, and one of them was, when you know what this and this means, and they had like the pound sign or number sign, and the asterisk and the exclamation point. And it's like it's two guys, crashing their cars into each other, swearing at each other. And it's like, wow, it's like that parody really kind of knocked it to mad when they were really high up on the pedestal there, but. Any other observations you've made? I mean, you probably consider Drucker the best parody artist, I assume?
I mean, he was kind of the best caricaturist as well. Sometimes when they had somebody like Don Martin do a parody, but that was only because either the movie was more of a fantasy movie that didn't rely on likenesses, or it didn't have anybody particularly recognizable in it. Like he did a Conan parody, but that was before Arnold Schwarzenegger was a big star, and so there really wasn't anybody that you would look at and say that doesn't look like that guy.
Yeah. Well, Don Martin certainly wasn't one on caricatures, although he did his best sometimes. I remember a Beatles poster that he did that was quite funny, and flipped it over and had all these rock and roll artists done the Martin way. I don't know if he'd ever heard any of them, but he did. He was able to copy them from photographs. Yeah. And
I remember that. I don't know if he ever if he knew anything about Patti Smith, because he drew her in a half shirt and screaming.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, he might have been aware of her since Gilda Radner used to parody her on Saturday Night Live, and I assume the Mad Guys were watching that show too.
They might,
way back
probably.
when, But I don't know that much about Martin's personal tastes on things, but he did also do parodies of fine art. He had the Mona Lisa, painting, and Blue Boy, and I can't, Whistler's Mother, I'm sure, and a few others, they did. So, I mean, but he still did it in his own style, which is kind of like the way he drew all his characters is kind of weird,
Yeah, I've noticed not just in the movie parodies, but overall, like all the writers and artists were kind of looked down on just rock and roll in Mad.
I've talked to other people about that too. You said you're going into the other publications like Cracked and Sick and things like that, and it's like it seemed like they were more embracing of more teeny bopper groups. Like you would never see anything about the Monkees in Mad, let's say, but there was parodies in the other publications, or even Herman's Hermits, or anything kind of. And even the Beatles, didn't really appear on the cover of Mad except for a special until 1968. So, that was kind of late in the game. Whereas...
Well, I think most of the people that worked for Mad were born in the 20s and 30s, and they only knew about rock and roll through their kids, and they just thought it was just a passing fad that wouldn't last a year.
Right.
And so they had their kids listening to Beatles records, and when they first heard it, they just thought it was just a phase that would only last, that wouldn't be around, nobody would have heard of at this point.
Right. And they also did parodies of Elvis and things back in the 50s. And
yeah.
So
nobody would know who Elvis was now, let alone in the late 50s.
Yeah, but you'd never get a same type of parody of Sinatra, let's say, because Sinatra actually was trying to be a accomplished movie actor and even won an Oscar for one of his performances. So, at that point, they weren't making fun of his music. They were, parodying his movies, like From Here to Eternity or something like that.
Well, they did do a one of their annuals actually had Mad, and they had Sinatra and one of the Beatles and a couple other pop stars on their cover.
Yeah.
But that was also at a time when both of them were top 40 hits. It wasn't all rock. Wasn't all top 40. You would have Beatles and you would have Sinatra, and you would have Mantovani all top 40.
Right. It is interesting, though, and I'm sure you've seen this by flipping through the issues. People like Jimi Hendrix, even if they never got a mention in the magazine, certainly like to read it because there's photos of him reading it. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't a posed thing. That was something he probably legitimately read. It just seems like something he would do. Yeah.
Yeah, they did a parody of 16 magazine, and I think some of the people they parodied were new to them then. Mm-hmm. And for a few issues after that, they had photos of the editor of 16 with some pop stars reading the magazine.
But I guess it's what we've said already is, Mad was highly popular, selling like 1 to 2 million copies an issue, which is unheard of nowadays, so it was a force to be reckoned with, as it were, so,
Yeah.
Going back to what you're saying, as far as artists, mentioned Don Martin, are there other artists like, say, well, you can name anyone you want, but like Jack Davis or Harry North that you think did a good job on parodies, or you wish that it was always Drucker or something like that?
I think Jack Davis did too. I prefer like Jack Davis's earlier stuff, like before he used like washes and relied on Rubylith and stuff. But when he did cross hatching and craft tint boards, I like that stuff better.
Mm-hmm. Do you think during the magazine era that they tended to use the artists appropriately? Like, it seemed like I assume you're going back to the comic books with Kurtzman and everything too, right?
Yeah.
And Kurtzman seemed to always pick the right artist for the right parody. Like it seemed like even though Davis could have done Superman, Super Duperman, it wouldn't have been as good as the way Wood did it, for example. So,
yeah. Well, they were basically all Kurtzman. If you've ever seen any of his roughs, they were pretty tight. They were actually tighter than most artists would be, than most finished art is. I actually had him for a teacher when I was at the School of Visual Arts, and he showed some of his roughs, and they were pretty tight. And he used several layers. And he was working on Annie Fanny at the time, and I saw some of his Annie Fanny layouts, and they look pretty much like the finished art without the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And he would like just do like the stick figures over on tracing paper, and then put a layer of tracing paper over that, and do a tighter version tracing basically the stick figures, and then a layer of tracing paper over that, doing a tighter version of the second layer of tracing paper, then a layer of tracing paper over that, tracing the third version, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I think Art Spiegelman did that same thing for Mouse, even though I've never seen him at work.
I think you're correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've seen Mouse before, yeah.
Yeah.
One question I have, since you did say you went back to the comic book era, so you're going back to issue 1, I assume.
Yeah.
Is there any is there any confusion about what is considered a movie parody, since you said you were doing movies? For example, some are obvious, like they did Ping Pong in issue 6, so that's a movie. But
he didn't really. That's not really a movie parody either, because King Kong was basically, it wasn't really a movie thing right at that point. It was like more of a monster like Dracula or Frankenstein.
True, but King Kong actually originated in the movies, unlike let's say Dracula, which is a book first. So that was my question. It's like, do you have troubles with, like, they did a parody of the Lone Ranger, which was a radio show, and a comic book, and a movie, and a TV series, would you consider that a movie for the sake of, or would you want it to be like, do you go by whether it's following the script of a specific movie?
Well, they did a High Noon thing. That's something I would consider their first real movie parody.
Okay.
Something they actually it seems like they actually went to the movie and took notes and copied either from the screen or from stills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like again, like Frankenstein. Frankenstein, is a movie. It's a book. It's
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's more of an institution than they did a Frankenstein thing too, but they weren't really parodying the James Whale 30s movie, just more the story of Frankenstein at that time.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I was kind of driving at. Is like, is it hard sometimes to determine? Well, is this really a movie parody, or if you have any doubts, you just don't cover that one?
Well, after Kurtzman, it really wasn't. It's really not that hard to determine.
Right. Yeah, I'm referring mainly to the comic book ones. Yeah.
Right, and there were very few of those. And also, they did a Dragnet a couple times. And first it was of the radio show, then it was of the TV show.
Right. Yeah, because they didn't even get the caricatures down. He was kind of like a Sherlock Holmes caricature, as it were.
Yeah. And like I said, I'll probably get to the TV parodies. Because the movie parodies they'll only last like a year or two if I post them and write about them at the same rate. I'll be done with them at some point. So I'll probably go back and do movie and TV parodies.
Mm-hmm. You mean TV? Yeah.
Yeah, just TV. Yeah.
Now, we talked about, the various artists that worked on it. Do you have a particular fondness for a particular writer that did movie parodies over the years?
Not really, because they were pretty much, they seemed pretty much the same. And there was a lot of, it seems to me there was a lot of rewriting by the editors.
Because, I'd have to reread certain ones, but it seemed like I always liked parodies more by Lou Silverstone and Stan Hart back in the day than, but, even Al Jaffe did his turn at some of these parodies, and so it's kind of interesting sometimes as who's writing these things, and you just expect it always to be like the first two I mentioned are Dick DeBartolo or something, and
yeah, but if they took bylines off, I wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between any of the writers, except maybe Frank Jacobs, only because he did all the musical parodies.
Right. Are you covering those too? Like, I know they did like a Star Wars musical and things like that, or
yeah, if it was a movie, because they did a Lord of the Rings musical parody, and they did that at the time the Lord of the Rings movie came out, and they did it in the style of the Bakshi animation. So yeah, that would count.
Okay.
And maybe a couple of the they parodied My Fair Lady more than once, but yeah, that's was after they showed the movie movie on TV every year, so that would count as well. Because they did a lot of Broadway musical parodies. I probably wouldn't include most of those.
Right. And I noticed sometimes they would do things like I remember they did instead of an individual. I think later on they did James Bond movies, but I think the first time they did 8 of them all at once or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they did that with Planet of the Apes as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I already included one Planet of the Apes parody.
So are you separating those out, or are you just keeping it strictly the way it is, like they said?
Well, as I said, I'm only using excerpts just because if I included the full thing, that would be violating the copyright.
Right. No, what I mean is, if they're covering multiple films, is your write-up covering all those films, or are you separating them out by film? Your write-ups.
I'm separating it out by film.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Because
yeah.
they've done a few of those, like they've done a few Siskel and Ebert parodies, and they've shown clips of the films, or they've done Academy Award parodies, and they did a thing called kids' version of adult films, where they parody things like Never on Sunday, and so I would just include parts of that page. And whatever, I can't think in my head of what else I think they did. Maybe the Days of Wine and Roses or the Hustler.
Right. Was there? I assume you're not reading Mad like all the time, so it's like, I mean, it might be like you're looking at things now with fresh eyes. Is there a movie parody that kind of struck you as odd that they parodied a particular movie, or one that's a particular favorite of yours?
Well, just the things I remember from when I was a kid in the 70s. I remember things like the Star Wars parodies, and I remember a lot of things from the 70s that I hadn't seen then that I've seen since. I remember like one of the first issues I read, they did a Clockwork Orange parody, which I never saw until maybe 15 years later. And I've pretty much heard of every film they've parodied. The only film I never, even at this point, I never heard of up until now was The Agony and the Ecstasy.
Okay.
But yeah, there are a couple parodies that I'm really surprised by. I'm surprised they did a parody of something called the Tamarind Seed, which I still haven't seen. Which I never heard of when it came out. I've only heard of it, and I guess they parodied it just because Julie Andrews was in it, and they felt the need to parody every Julie Andrews film. Maybe that was the only, or they thought it would be a big hit when it came out. I don't know.
Yeah.
They also. They parodied Lost Horizon, which I guess was hyped as a big hit when it came out.
Yeah. And it wasn't. Yeah.
I'm more surprised by the some of the parodies the Imitations did that I haven't included, which I think they did because they had a lot of the stars from the same movies that Mad did, and they used them because they were able to use some of the same caricatures that Mad did.
Now, are you covering any movies that might have not been parodied in Mad, but in the other ones? Example, Cracked did a parody of a movie called Capone that they thought was going to be a big, big hit. It wasn't. But Mad never did a parody of it.
No, I only, like, I've included some of the, like, if Mad has done the parodies, I'll include the ones that the other magazines have done, but not if they haven't been included in Mad.
Okay, so Mad's your reference point on all of it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Still, yeah. Circling back around, I am surprised by some, like The Swimmer, which is a movie I like a lot. I'm surprised that was parodied. It was parodied in Sick, but I think they only parodied it so they could, because there were a lot of Burt Lancaster references by Mort Drucker. And I think that was the only reason they parodied it, because I can't think of any other reason.
Yeah, my dad, he didn't see The Swimmer when it came out. In fact, he hadn't even heard of it. But once home video came through, my dad started renting or checking out like everything that he missed over the years, and so he saw The Swimmer about 10 years ago and told me about it. He goes, "This is an oddball film. I thought I saw every Burt Lancaster movie," and he liked it, but it's like, and then I eventually saw it, and I thought, this is a good but strange film, but I don't think it was very popular when it came out. I notice you've been putting comments about your blog posts on Facebook and things like that, and one person was kind of surprised they did the bad seed, But I think even that had more of a notoriety than say The Swimmer or something like that. At the time,
Well, was that a hit when it came out? I don't know.
It was a hit enough, according to. I mean, my dad knew about it. Again, using him as a reference.
Yeah.
My dad started reading Mad from the very beginning. He was about 14 when Mad first came out as a comic, and so
Yeah, because a lot of when it first became a magazine, a lot of their movies, their parodies were more in a review format than than a comic format.
Mm-hmm. When did that kind of change?
Yeah.
Did it change? I mean, how long did they do it in that review format? Was it...
For about until maybe the 60s or so.
Okay, so it's that late. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I noticed they always kind of tried to do different experimental things over time. The one that kind of sticks in my head is East Side Story, where they had actual photographs of the United Nations building and things like that, as opposed to having Drucker draw it all.
Right.
I don't know what I just mentioning it. It's like it just seemed like that they were more experimental in those days on the parodies, where by the 70s, let's say, they were more in an established groove of just here's the parody, here it is.
Yeah. Well, that by the 70s, that became more what they were known for. Mm-hmm. And in the 50s and 60s, they just pretty much they still did everything in the 70s, but in the 50s and 60s, they pretty much covered everything, and that's what you were to expect. But then when National Lampoon came along, that pretty much took a bite out of their adult readership.
Mm-hmm. And
so they had to find more of a niche. And then when things like Saturday Night Live came along, and like I said, there were other venues for satire, they became more juvenile and aimed more for a younger audience, and catered more to them, and that's when they did more movie parodies. Mm-hmm. And TV show parodies. They were more like straight out punning of the names and likenesses of the characters. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't do it as much punning of the names before that either. Mm-hmm. Because like another thing I posted was a parody of the Alamo, but it was more. It wasn't really a straight parody, but more like John Wayne taking you on the set and showing you how he made it. Mm-hmm. And so they did more things like that, like a look at this movie.
Right.
They did a parody of Alfred Hitchcock, which I'll get to when I get to it. It was concentrating more of North by Northwest, because that was the newest Hitchcock movie then.
Right.
But it was a parody of Alfred Hitchcock as a whole. Like, this is what an Alfred Hitchcock movie looks like.
I was wondering if there's any in the parodies that you've been reading, if there's any pop culture references that even to this day might have gone over your head.
Well, kind of. They did sometimes the people who read things will explain that to me as well. Because they did a parody of the Birds, and some of the Birds attacking were things like Steve Allen was one of the Birds, because he said one of his catchphrases was "How's your bird?" Right. They had another one I didn't that totally baffled me, and somebody pointed out that it was Red Skelton, because he also had a character, and one of his catchphrases had something to do with birds.
Mm-hmm. Well, he always imitated these two seagull characters.
And I think that was it.
Yeah. On his opening of his TV show, he'd do, we're going to do... And they had dumb voices, kind of like his Clem Diddlehofer voice. It was kind of like Bullwinkle, kind of...
Right.
But, yeah, it's very obscure, so do you have to find yourself looking things up on Google or something just to see what the heck they're talking about, or...
Not as much. I explain a lot just because I figure other people do. The one thing I hate is history lessons from people older than me, even though I get about 95% of references from before my time. When the Crumb movie came out, my parents figured I didn't even know who Crumb was.
Wow.
Even though I probably knew more than them. And they didn't even know that Robert Crumb was still doing things. They just knew him as some hippie artist from 1968.
Wow.
And they didn't think he did anything since then.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
As a kid, I didn't see it as a kid, but I was aware of Fritz the Cat.
Yeah.
And probably to a lesser extent Zap comics, because I wasn't reading those type of things till a little bit later. But
yeah,
I probably had an awareness of it at least by the time I was 10 years old. So
yeah. But on my Mad blog, I do explain a few things. Just because I think a lot of people they don't know when, because in the Apocalypse Now parody, they make a couple references to Hanoi Jane, and I think a lot of people don't even know what that is. Don't even know anything about how Jane Fonda was considered a traitor during the Vietnam War. So I have a couple lines explaining that. Mm-hmm. And like how Marlon Brando makes a reference to some Indian broad, so I have to explain that when he won the Oscar for The Godfather, he had an American Indian accept a award on his behalf.
Right.
Just little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a panel where Nixon said, "Yes, you would buy a used car from me." Some people probably don't know about the "Would you buy a used car from this man?" tagline from the '60s. So I mentioned that. Just little things like that, which people think I might not know, and people my age might not know. So if they were to look at that, they might not know. So I felt the need to say something, even though a lot of people would get things.
So when you're done with this project, what is your ultimate goal? Is this going to be turned into a book or anything like that, or you don't know at this time?
I don't know at this point. I've done a few things which I've kind of aborted. I had a thing called 1001 Tweets at the Movies, but I eventually stopped that just because people don't really care about movies they haven't seen and don't know anything about. The idea was to do little movie reviews in 288 characters or less. But if people don't know anything about them, they're not interested.
Yeah. Because
they only care about things they're familiar with. So I gave up on that. But I do want to concentrate more on my own cartoons.
Yeah. Well, if you do have the ability to get it turned into a book somehow, I think it might be an interesting reference book, especially considering since Mad doesn't do movie parodies anymore.
But Mad still is a licensed property, so
true.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if the project you're working on is authorized by Mad, or if it is just a scholarly thing, or if it is tied in with them, or what.
Well, I mean, since I'm covering it, the way I have always done my books, it's generally covered by fair use. I am constricted the way you are, that I can't be reprinting entire articles and things like that. Right. But I can certainly put an image or two if I'm referencing it in the text.
Right.
So, you might be able to get away with that unless you're, putting a ton of images or something. But it might be more for a reference than actually showing images. But I have to check out the website, like I said, just to see.
Yeah, maybe if I did a book, I'd have to put in more text or something.
Yeah. It just seems like I'm going to be jealous for a second. It's like, why? I could have thought of this idea. Damn it.
Yeah, and also, if I were to track down, I couldn't track down any of the writers and artists because most of them are dead.
Yeah.
So I know when you did your Cracked books, you were able to find most of the people involved, and most people don't know this story anyway, but you were able to get most of the people involved because most of the people were still alive.
Right.
And also because nobody knows who owns the copyrights anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, and I've repeated this before, but I'll say it again, in the Cracked thing, the only pushback I got was, well, you're not reprinting anything from the website, are you? And I go,
yeah.
No. And they go, oh, okay. They didn't care if I reprinted everything from the magazine, but I wasn't going to take advantage of it and do that because that wasn't the nature of that book. But and I'm not suggesting to anyone else that it's out of copyright. It's just that they, at that time, only cared about the website. They did not care about the old magazine. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what Warner Brothers is protective of with Mad, because I know they use it to sell things of Alfred E. Newman and Spy vs. Spy, and maybe have books of the Don Martin stuff. But other than that, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing over there. I mean, it's almost kind of like, I don't know if they like to keep Mad going just as a copyright thing or what, because once they took it off a newsstand distribution last year, it's like, what's the point? I mean, not everybody who used to buy it on the newsstand necessarily went out to subscribe. I did, but, that's because I said, I'm not going to be able to find this anymore, because my preferred way was to buy it on the newsstand. I didn't like buying it or getting it in the mail because I didn't want it to get all scrunched up in my mailbox, which happens on occasion, and I'm like,
I just know that they're more proprietary, just because they are owned by a corporation, and they are more proprietary, being used as a trademark. But on my own blog, I don't even have the Mad logo or Alfred E. Newman on it, so they wouldn't care about that.
Yeah, I've usually been pretty successful in skirting around the issue on different projects I've worked on. I've had people threaten lawsuits and things like that, but a lot of times it's just people upset about, and I won't name names, but people upset about what I wrote, even though they gave me permission to use that material. It's like, okay, whatever. But it's like, I just try to, make it definitely, like in the case of the Mad book, it's definitely stated that I don't own any copyrights in this. I'm not implying any ownership. I don't want any ownership. I'm just writing about a magazine that I like. So,
I should ask some of the people, some of the, do you know any of the Tomorrow's people?
Yes, I do.
Because
and we can talk offline about that, but
when they do the Jack Kirby collector, I don't know what their issue is when they reprint Jack Kirby stuff.
Well, they are, I will admit, they are very strong sticklers for getting permissions, so which is a good thing, and so they have basic blanket agreements, as it were, with Marvel and DC and the other publishers. Yes, you can reprint our stuff within reason for this purpose. In the case of the Jack Kirby collector, I don't know the specifics, but I know they have an arrangement with the Jack Kirby estate that they can reprint things. So and it was just a general fanzine, and now it's more like a prozine, as it were. But it still has the same origins that they sought out the permissions because they don't like to ruffle any feathers, which is good. It's admirable that they're doing that. because they don't want to have any situation where if they forgot to get permission for X article, let's say, then the next time they need to get permission, well, you didn't get permission last time, we're not going to give it to you this time, it's like,
right.
And that's what they're trying to avoid. So
yeah.
And they do well, and it takes some time for issues to come out, books that they've done, because they like to dot all their I's and cross all their T's and everything, but hey, that's what they're there for. So
yeah, the thing I'm doing, like a few dozen people at most are looking at it, but yeah, if I like somebody like them, like even if I get permission, they might say, "Oh, why don't we do it?" And then it would be taken out of my hands if I tried to do a book about it.
Well, they're not usually that way. At least that publisher, I wouldn't. I won't. Yeah, again, I won't name names, but very few publishers actually would do that. They're usually pretty good about keeping the person who originated the idea along for the ride, as it were. So, yeah. But anyway, any other projects in the works? We started the hour with that, but just to kind of wrap things up.
Well, I'm almost finished with Hail Seizure, and probably I most likely have an agent for that, and we're shopping that around. And during the quarantine, a lot of the people that work for publishers are out of work right now, but the ones that are seem more receptive to new things for the next few months at least. So I'm hoping for something with that, and I'm hoping something with that picks up.
Okay. And if people want to get a hold of you, or they want to read the Mad Blog, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, my email address is on it, so they can get in touch with me through that.
And what's the URL on the Mad Blog?
It's rated Blech, BLE, 2 C's, H, .blogspot.com.
Okay. And anything else you'd like to say or plug?
No, it does have links to my other projects on it. I'm not anonymous. I'm not keeping it underground or anything like that. It's not a big secret. So yeah, I do mention that it's only a hobby, and I have my own artist's biography on it, and it links to other things I do on it. So yeah, it's just one of the things I do not for profit. But yeah, I'm a cartoonist, and I live off royalties of that, and I worked on SpongeBob for about a year, and the comic as well. So yeah, I'm mostly known for that, and I mentioned that as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's links to my email address and my web page on there, so people can easily get a hold of me.
2020 was the first time kids asked, "But why?" And we didn't have an answer. As the world scrambled to fight COVID-19, the mental health of our youngest generation has been overlooked. Wanting to change this, we have created Monster Dance, the first multimedia picture book for children about life in the time of the pandemic, and give families the opportunity to provide an uplifting tale for the little ones in their lives. For this, we've assembled the mightiest of teams. Beloved illustrator Guy Gilchrist, author and Madeline Editions founder Eva Liu, physician and co-founder of Donate PPE, Dr. Karen Tsai, and acclaimed actor, and on this occasion, your narrator, Dennis O'Hare. Monster Dance follows Maurice, an endearingly melodramatic dog, and Charlie, and artistic little girl as they grapple with a world that's suddenly gone topsy-turvy. Available through Kickstarter as both a hard copy book and an enhanced ebook, Monster Dance is helping children better understand and overcome their coronavirus fears. Thanks to your support and pledges, we will be donating copies of the book and PPE masks to hospitals around the world.
Thank you for listening, and thank you, Sam Henderson, for being my special guest. Episode number 83 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. Become a patron of Mark Arnold and Fun Ideas Productions. If everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, that would be a tremendous help in continuing the production of my books and this podcast. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. The opening and closing music for the Fun Ideas podcast is provided courtesy of Andrew the Slow Poisoner Goldfarb and is used with permission. This has been the Fun Ideas podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2020, Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you, and good night.
Headed home to a cardboard hut with duct tape doors. At the price I'm paying, be glad it isn't yours. Now get up, Crab Mountain, get up. 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 That mountain of crab. And don't fall back. Don't fall back. Don't fall